Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Johanna Munson, and I am the worship associate for our service today, alongside our minister, Zachary Vinson. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time either now or later in the service to make a contribution to help Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, and in the beauty of whom and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. I'd like to share a quote from Blaise Pascal, a 17th century mathematician. Imagination, it creates beauty, justice, and happiness, which is everything in this world. Imagination, what a concept. Seeing what is not actually present and cannot be felt or smelled or tasted or heard or experienced, and yet, to the one imagining, the images seem more real than reality. What a gift we have, indeed. My life has been blessed with a vivid imagination, and so I'd like to share how I see it has worked in my life. As a child, I loved to play dress-up with my sister and my friends, and we had a big wicker chair with an assortment of costumes stored in the base. Pretend you're a puppy. No, you be the puppy and I'll be the owner. I'll be the mommy and you be the baby. Trying out new roles was one of my favorite ways to use imagination, up to about age 6. As I got into reading, I turned to books, and especially those which came in series, and was immediately able to put myself in the story with the characters. Admiring the spunk of Ramona the Pest, traipsing through the forest with the children from the Chronicles of Narnia, following Laura Ingalls through her adventures from the big woods to moves further west, I was right there with them. I imagined further adventures for the characters and wished I could talk to them and get to know them better. Then came middle school, and unfortunately, being bullied. My best friend Sharon and I spent as much time as we could together, riding our bikes to school and then playing in the pool after the school day was done. This was in Florida, not in Washington. I guess the two girls who bullied us were jealous and insecure. At least that's how I see it now. But imagination helped me in several ways. I could imagine ways to escape from them, but more importantly, to wreak revenge on them. The satisfaction of seeing them get their comeuppance was magnificent, in my head, that is. Imagination provided an important escape from a difficult reality. I ended up switching schools in 9th grade, and Sharon moved out of state, so that ended that chapter. Now, imagination in high school, that was a powerful time. I've always been an introvert, but I could imagine having a cute boyfriend who would ask me to the homecoming dance. Not that I really wanted to go, but I loved to imagine the dress that I would wear and how I would do my hair. I got very interested in sewing my own clothes, and I even made a dress to go over a hoop skirt that I had acquired. Seems like a minor use of imagination, you might say, but at that point, I was imagining myself in future roles, relationships, and careers, and enjoying the wide-open, free-range possibilities. Nothing was impossible at that stage. I see it was at that time that I developed a kind of meditation practice that enabled my fancy to take flight. I played endless rounds of solitaire during my high school years, and that allowed my mind to wander. Now, as an adult in my 50s, I meditate on my cushion or in my favorite chair or on walks in the woods, and again, I lose myself in those images. There was a time in my 30s and 40s where I was focused on raising my children, keeping a home and marriage going, and as I reflect on that time, I can see that I kind of lost my connection with my imagination and the force it represents in evolving as a human being. Depression set in as my relationship with my husband faltered, and I truly felt I had lost my way. Luckily, I can say that now, the marriage ended, and I was set free to build back my sense of self, and along with it, my capacity to imagine a different life. In the last 9 years, I have constantly reimagined my life, its purpose and its form, and take comfort in my commitment to continuing that process. Imagination has brought me this far, and I know it will carry me to my end.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are brothers and sisters, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our service for Sunday, February 7th here at Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. Before we continue more fully into this time together, I have a few announcements I want to share with all of you. The first is that we are currently taking up a special collection at Cedars for the Seattle Clemency Project. We meant to do this a few weeks ago, but the logistics kind of didn't quite come together. And then I forgot to make the announcement last week. And so we've decided to continue ahead with that plan anyways. As you heard a few weeks ago when we had a guest speaker lead our service, the Seattle Clemency Project's mission is to increase access to justice by matching reformed individuals with pro bono attorneys to seek early release from prison, as well as to provide support services for people who are released from prison, including clothing, food, rent, transportation, as well as help finding work and developing life skills. To participate in this special collection, people are encouraged to send a check, a paper check, to the Cedars office. The check can be made out to Cedars with a note in the memo line designating it for the Seattle Clemency Project. We'll receive those checks over the next few weeks and then gather all the funds together and send them off to make our final contribution. Another announcement that I wanted to share with all of you is really just to encourage members and friends of Cedars to take some time in the coming week to reach out to some of our families in our community. You may have heard recently of the decision of many schools to return to in-person instruction. Some of them have already begun this process. And with that comes some additional stress on families as they figure out how to adjust to being back on a school schedule, as well as the fact that vaccines for children and youth are not available yet. And so any additional support that you could reach out and offer to our families and parents, or even those in our community who are teachers, just to let them know that we care for them and are here for them. Another quick announcement is just to give you a heads up that starting in about 3 weeks in March, we'll be having our annual stewardship campaign. The campaign will run through the month of March. Our theme this year is Belonging Together, which we'll explore more fully once the campaign gets underway. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that this will be happening and to encourage all of you to keep an eye on communications from the church for information on how you can participate in our stewardship drive. And the final announcement before I share our words for our call to worship is just to let all of you know that in about 2 weeks' time, or I guess a week from now, as you're viewing this, February 15th through the 22nd, I will be away from Cedars. I'm planning to take this time just to take a little vacation to coincide with my regular scheduled weekend off and to come back refreshed again with all of you to continue our work together. So, those are some announcements for you all. And as we continue into our worship service, I'd invite you to center yourself with these words from theologian Howard Thurman. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of the holy, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in good times or in tempests, I may not forget that which my life is committed to. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. And so in this time together, may we commit to keeping fresh before us those moments of high resolve as we come together to worship. Come, let us worship together.
I want to tell you a story today about the invention of the light bulb. Now, you may think you know the story of the invention of the light bulb, the story of Thomas Edison, but I want to tell you the story of a different man, Lewis Howard Latimer, and the role he played in inventing the light bulb. Now, first, I just want to give you some background on Lewis Howard Latimer because his is a very amazing story. And I want to start with Lewis's parents, Rebecca and George. Rebecca and George Latimer were enslaved people in Virginia in 1842. They were young, maybe 20, 22, and they decided they could no longer stand being enslaved people, and they made a daring escape. And they made it all the way to Boston, where they found safety and freedom for a short time. And then someone recognized George Latimer, and he was arrested and put on trial. This outraged the people in Boston, and many people came to George Latimer's defense. And eventually, an African-American minister in Boston paid $400 for George's release. And so George and Rebecca were free in Boston, and they had 4 children, the youngest of whom was Lewis. And Lewis had a difficult childhood, in part because as our nation moved ever closer to the Civil War, it became more and more dangerous for free Black people in the North. And eventually, George Latimer had to leave his family and escape to Canada to find safety. And so Rebecca Latimer raised her 4 children alone. So Lewis Latimer didn't get much opportunity to go to school. He only had a few years of elementary school, but Lewis was a very inventive, curious, creative young man. He loved poetry. He loved to draw. He loved to learn. And so he made his way as best he could. And when Lewis was 16, he decided to join the Union Navy and fight for his country in the Civil War. When Lewis came home after the Civil War was over, he found a job in a draftsman office. So he began to put his ability to draw to use, drafting plans, drawing whatever needed to be done for the company. And while he was there, Lewis taught himself mechanical drawing. And he became so good at it that he attracted the attention of Alexander Graham Bell. Now, you may know Alexander Graham Bell as the inventor of the telephone. And one of the reasons we know Alexander Graham Bell is the inventor of the telephone is because of Lewis Latimer. Because Lewis Latimer was so good and so quick at drawing that he drew up the design for the telephone, all of the schematics, all of the plans, and he got it to the patent office just a couple of hours before one of Alexander Graham Bell's competitors. Who knew? At any rate, Lewis Latimer continued to draw and continued to invent and come up with new ideas, and eventually he was hired by an electrical company that was the opponent, was the rival to Thomas Edison's company. And while he was there, Lewis Latimer invented a new way to make a light bulb. Because Thomas Edison, yes, had invented the light bulb, but Thomas Edison's light bulbs lasted only a few days. And so they weren't very practical for mass use. So Lewis Latimer took the light bulb apart and came up with a better way to create a carbon filament that lasted much longer and was much more stable so that the light bulb could be mass produced. And so more and more people could have electric light. Thomas Edison was pretty impressed. He was so impressed that he hired Lewis Latimer away from the other company, and Lewis Latimer worked for Thomas Edison's company for years and years. He became so well known in the electric lighting that he wrote the first major book on how it all worked. Pretty impressive. Lewis Latimer wasn't done. Over all of this time, Lewis Latimer was busy inventing other things as well. He invented what's called what was called then the water closet for moving trains, which means basically he invented the toilet for trains. Lewis Latimer also invented a very early mechanism for air conditioning. So ultimately, over the course of his career, Lewis Latimer invented or helped invent the telephone, the light bulb, the toilet, and air conditioning. All things that are critical to modern life. But he wasn't done. Lewis Latimer wasn't just an inventor. He also had a deep spiritual creative side, and so he helped to found the first Unitarian church in Queens, New York. And the church, the Unitarian church there, became an important place for working for social justice, for helping to educate immigrants. And Latimer, increasingly as he grew older, spent a great deal of his time there, teaching English, teaching science to immigrants, working for civil rights and social justice in New York City. So Latimer was both an inventor and a Unitarian pioneer. And I have to tell you that before I asked people to begin to investigate great Black pioneers in Unitarian Universalism in this past worship packet, I had never heard of Lewis Latimer. And yet, he is an amazing person that we should all celebrate as a part of our Unitarian heritage. And so in this coming month of Black History Month, I encourage you to do some investigation, be detectives. There are so many stories out there that we don't know or that we barely know. And we need to know them. We need to celebrate the people in our history and in our tradition. So may it be so, and amen.
Last week in this part of our service, I kind of had a little fun showing off my awkward movements to all of you, and even had an opportunity to laugh with Tyler Weaver about how awkward being embodied and moving can be, especially when you're alone in a room looking at a camera. And so I thought I might invite us into a little bit of that awkward goofiness again. Not as much, but just a little. So as we enter this time of prayer and meditation, just take a moment, however you feel comfortable, maybe close your eyes if you feel okay with that. Let your shoulders relax. Just breathe. In this moment, now I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in with me in a moment. But as you take a deep breath in, I want us to raise our hands up, raise them all the way up as we breathe in. And as we raise them up, to imagine a light just coming up and just enveloping our body. And to exhale and bring our hands back down. And just to see this light come and contract. And so here we go. Breathing in and out. And breathing in and out. One more time with our mind's eye, breathing in. Breathing in that light and out. And please open your hearts in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and community, you who called us into this moment through a series of seemingly convoluted connections, causing us to be here together now. Remind us of the power of this connection, of the truth of this connection, the truth that our fate is bound together, the truth that what happens to one among us happens to us all. Help us to feel this in our breath, in the movements of our bodies. Help us to feel the bonds we share. In this time, we hold in our hearts those essential workers, those who continue to do the work necessary to keep life moving forward. We ask for health, for healing, for protection for those who are afraid of the virus, who have contracted the virus and are in recovery. We ask that those who can receive the vaccine receive it, and that those of us who still have to wait our turn can do so in safety and patience. We pray for our teachers and educators and staff, the children and families returning to school. We pray for those who are alone and struggling. In this moment, as we hold all of these people and situations in this light of love, may we be moved. May we feel that tug of the strings connecting us and be called into deeper action, knowing that the way we move through this world matters. And so may we move with intention and grace together. May it be so. Amen.
We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along.
We will not stop praying. We will not stop praying.
It's hard for me to believe that we're already so far into the month of February. In just a few weeks, we'll cross over the threshold of a year of physical distancing and virtual church. Our last Sunday together was on Sunday, March 1st, 2020 at the Island School. That's the day that I delivered a sermon titled The Generosity of Numbers. Originally, this sermon made use of a sort of extended metaphor that I had developed that talked about how emotions and feelings, including generosity, are contagious. However, as the news of a new virus began to spread, I decided to spend the night before rewriting my sermon and stripping it of references to contagions or the spread of things from one person to the next. At the time, I had no idea how much of the next year would be taken up by conversations about the spread of COVID-19 and the changes and the death left in the wake of this virus. That day, March 1st, 2020, represented a shift for us. Those initial months brought with them a lot of new innovation, new ideas, new technologies. Zoom, a program that this time last year few of us even knew about, soon became the standard way for us to gather together, to meet and do business and to care for each other. We learned to navigate video production tools. Here I am now with all of you through those tools. And we learned to construct a church in cyberspace. At this point, as COVID began and we were embracing all of these new ways of being together, we had little idea how long this would last. We thought it would be temporary, short term. I remember the first few conversations talking about how in June or July at the latest, we would be back together. As we've seen since then, that wasn't the case. Almost a year later, here we are, still drawing on these innovations that we made to keep us together. And we will continue to do so until it's safe for us to gather again in person. Thinking back on how the innovations that got us to this point where we are now came about, I'm going to be honest with all of you, there wasn't really a plan at first. We simply started doing stuff. It was like throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. We would try things, and if that didn't work, quickly move on to the next. It was uncharted territory. There was no guidebook telling us how to make church happen in virtual spaces like this. Reverend Jessica Starr Rocker and I worked together those first few weeks to share what little skill that we had between us. We passed our knowledge between each other. I found myself suddenly spending all of this time at night watching YouTube videos, learning how to do online broadcasting and video editing. Chris and I spent tons of time doing research, learning which wires we needed to connect pieces of equipment to our computers to do the recording. It was stressful and frantic, and we figured things out on the fly. But it wasn't planned. It wasn't really a choreographed effort. The thing about this time that I find to be interesting now is that in all the innovations that came about because of the situation we found ourselves in, I don't think that despite making all those innovations, I don't think I ever thought that I would be leading a congregation through a global pandemic. There's a phrase that ministers across many different denominations like to use when we encounter new situations. We like to categorize these experiences as, quote, things they didn't teach us in seminary. And navigating a pandemic, as we've done, definitely falls into the category of things they didn't teach us in seminary. Never once was this a reality I thought we would be facing. And yet we've done it. Despite the time and energy that went into these adaptations, the whole process did feel a little bit rigid. Yes, there was a need to develop new creative solutions, but the urgency of things last spring made it hard to recognize the role of creativity in the process. It was necessity, not imagination, that got us here and shaped this time, as well as the ways that we have been able to engage since then. So, thinking about how it was necessity and not creativity that got us to this moment, that it was more just the circumstances, not a grand thought out plan, I've spent a bit of time thinking about what role creativity or imagination can or should play in the rest of our journey together until we're back in person. And I'm going to take a bit of a segue here. As I've been thinking about this, I've found myself doing a little bit of reading. Since sometime in probably like early December, I found myself reading more and more fantasy novels. I used to read quite a bit of fantasy when I was a teen and devoured novel after novel. But when I started college, I found that the demands of my classes really dictated what it is that I had time or energy to read. After college, I had spent so much time reading nonfiction and poetry that I found myself pretty much sticking to those categories of literature. But something recently caused this to shift. If I'm honest, at first I think I turned back to fantasy novels because I was wanting a way to escape from some of the real world problems. There hasn't been a ton of opportunities for escape or recreation lately. So reading fantasy novels seemed like a great outlet for that sort of distraction I was looking for. I began my foray back into fiction by listening to the Harry Potter books on Audible as I sat knitting. However, soon I found myself craving the feeling of a real book, the smell and heft of the rough pages of a paperback novel. I reread a few books I read many years ago as a teen, the Earthsea trilogy by Ursula K. Le Guin. And now currently I'm about halfway through a trilogy titled The Magicians by author Lev Grossman. All of these books, these works of fiction, are about people rising against exceeding odds. They are tales of good overcoming evil and the growth that is possible when we commit ourselves to accomplishing a goal. The thing I have found striking since starting to read fantasy again is the shift that it has caused me to experience in the way that I think about the near future, the way that I view the future 6 months from now. As I mentioned earlier, there wasn't a lot of thought to some of the innovations we implemented out of the necessity over the past year. A situation presented itself, and there was a need to figure it out, and so we did it and moved forward. We worked to refine things and honed our skills along the way. And this journey is not yet over. People have joined us as we journey, bringing their skills, their talent, their ability to help us, and we've grown. And yet, we're still in this space together, continuing through the uncertainty. As we continue on this journey, I wonder to myself, what can we start doing now? in the situation we are currently in, to help get us through the rest of our time in quarantine and help us to lay the foundation for our eventual return to in-person life. What imaginative new ideas can we start dreaming up now so that when we do come back together, we have a plan? And not just a plan that deals with the logistics of how we are going to do things, but a plan that helps us to articulate a vision for what it is we are going to do together. Thinking of this plan that I see us needing, I'm reminded of a quote from Albert Einstein. In this quote, Einstein says that logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. That logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Reading fantasy in light of these words from Albert Einstein has helped remind me that hard things are possible and that the future is full of all sorts of opportunities, chances for us to try new things and grow in new ways, as well as opportunities to reinvent ourselves and harness the lessons that we have learned. But in order for any of this to be possible, for these possibilities to come into fruition, someone must first speculate and imagine. Imagination is a powerful force. We may not always recognize it, but the truth is that before anything is made by us as human beings, it must first be conceived of in the imagination. Before any invention or work of art or way of being is brought into the world, it must first be dreamed up in the mind of someone who believes in this new possibility. Our time in isolation is not over. I know many of you have begun to receive your vaccines, and that's great. That's awesome. I'm actually really excited. But for many others, it's going to be some time before they're able to be vaccinated. We're not entirely sure what that timeline is currently. But this includes people that in the groups that I've talked about, teachers and children returning to school, retail and service industry workers, and many others who, because of life circumstances, do not qualify to be vaccinated yet. This means that to keep everyone safe and healthy, we'll need to continue limiting our physical contact to the best of our ability for a while still. To do our part to help keep each other safe while we continue through this pandemic together. But that doesn't mean that we just need to spend this time sitting around waiting. There are things that we can do now to be productive and to put in place those things to move us to where we want to be. Unlike the suddenness that brought COVID upon us, we know that there is an end in sight. Yes, it's still probably some months off, if not longer, but it seems that there is an end nonetheless. Recognizing this, the question is, what are we going to do with this time? How are we going to make use of it in a way that leaves us prepared for our next chapter together? Asking these questions, I think back to what Albert Einstein said about logic getting us from A to B, but how imagination can take us everywhere. We have already begun laying some of the logical pieces for what comes next. The budget leadership team here at Cedars has begun working. They're actually pretty far along in crafting our budget. The budget that they're planning for puts in place a plan that has us continuing through with virtual services through September. And they've planned the budget accordingly. We also know that eventually, when we do return to in-person services, the Cedars teams will need to return to the important work of setting up and preparing our space on Sunday morning and planning other activities for fellowship together. We know these logical pieces, the things that help us to move from A to B. But what we don't yet know is those imaginative and creative pieces that will help us create the circumstances to get where it is we really want to be. The circumstances under which the hard things we dream of will become achievable. For instance, what form will worship take, or meetings, when we return to in-person life? How will we continue to offer options for participation for those who, for whatever reason, can't physically be together with us? What are our plans for in-person learning opportunities for our children and youth? What service projects or social issues will we take up once it's safe for us to be back together? What things will we celebrate or mourn together? These are the questions I think we need to start thinking about together. Yes, we still have some time before making that transition, but my hunch is that the time is going to pass before we realize it. Time's been speeding by pretty quickly lately, at least for me. Spending some of this time speculating and thinking about what things could be like when we return. To be more intentional about the process of returning. To make choices that will position us in a place that puts us on the trajectory that we hope for. It's a chance to engage our imagination and forethought and move beyond the simple reactivity that we faced this past spring, to be strategic and thoughtful and imaginative. When I think about this, the possibility of engaging our imaginations and begin to think about what really happens next for us. When I think about this, I'm reminded of a part from Johanna's reflection, where she talks about playing dress up with her sister as a child. In this reflection, Johanna made use of an expression that many young children use when playing make-believe. It's the expression, pretend. Pretend you're a puppy, she said. Or thinking back to my own childhood, pretend the floor is lava. Playing make-believe, pretending that things that aren't real are, can be a goofy game. But it can also be a powerful chance to consider how things could be different. And I think that's the thing my recent foray back into fantasy novels has provided. It's a window into engaging our imagination that allows us a chance to see the world and ourselves in new lights, opening us to new possibilities and opportunities. So with that said, I want to start encouraging each of us in our interactions to start thinking about what life can be like when we return to in-person activities. What is the first project that a committee you're involved with here at Cedars is eager to take on? Pretend the day is upon us. What do you do? What is the first thing that you want to do when we are back together? Pretend we are together again. What comes first? Pretend and speculate and dream and imagine new possibilities together. Start sharing these dreams, these ideas with each other, with me. Let's get excited about what is possible when we return. And together, let's move towards those things we only once dreamed of. Can we pretend and imagine a new world is waiting to be reborn and start acting as if we truly believe that, to the glory of life?
Love will guide us, peace has guide us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to one another and the world begins anew. As we go forth, may we be inspired to engage the world with our imagination and creativity, and use these gifts to begin creating the world we hope for. May it be so.